Greetings, friends. Welcome to the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. I'm super thrilled to be here with you this week. I wanted to first go into some announcements, but before I do, I hope that you guys are practicing self-care and that you are doing your best to control the elements in front of you that you can control and leaving the rest to the powers that be and to prayer. With that said, I will say that the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with Dr. India White will be featured on the X Factor EDU network hosted by Dr. Matthew Joseph, and it can also be found on Spotify. It can also be found on all of my main social media networks. So my platforms, Facebook is Miss India White, LinkedIn is The India White, Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach, Instagram is Indie238, YouTube is India White 123, and TikTok is Dr. India White. So please follow me on those channels. I appreciate all of those that have been working with me on the grit movement, those that have been just really seeing the power of grit and that we need more of it. I appreciate all of you for that. I also wanted to encourage you to check out the website, www.india-white.com, for books, blogs, or to schedule me for any of your upcoming events. Also, upcoming events that I have now. I'm honored this week to speak for NCSM's virtual conference. We'll be speaking on all different types of great topics, along with some other rock star speakers throughout the nation. So please check us out there. There's also a STEM conference this Saturday I'm honored to be a part of as well. So just be on the lookout for that. I'll be doing different social media blasts on those different opportunities. And then, of course, I'm super excited about VCTM in Vermont next month. I'm honored to be in the room with many wonderful people in Vermont and to have the opportunity to be a keynote there. So I'm super honored about that. Also, the Grit Academy is up and running. I'm thankful for the students that are a part of it. And if you're interested in having either your child or someone that to enroll in that, please keep me posted. Also, do not forget to check out the Grit Mini Workshop on the Grassroots Workshops website. That's not heavily promoted, but it is a lot of good stuff. And so I hope that you guys are able to go there and see that. It's buried on that website somewhere. You got to dig and find it. But I think if you just look for the word grit or whatever, you should be able to find it. So thank you to all of those that have been in support for that. I also wanted to remind you guys to check out the grit calendars if you are trying to cultivate grit this year and hold yourself accountable. I promise these work. They're wonderful. And with that said, I'm going to go into this podcast, which is the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. If you're trying to close the achievement gap, but you're having classroom management issues or your students just aren't motivated to do the work, then you can join me on the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. And we will get you guys squared away for sure. So with that said, we're now going to transition into our topic of developing grit in students. Again, we're going to be talking about developing grit in students. I think right now we are in such an interesting time when it comes down to what's motivating our students. We looked at the NAEP data. We talked about that last week. If you were able to see, or a couple of weeks ago, actually 2 weeks ago, if you're able to tune into the podcast, you'll see that we did cover the NAEP data pretty thoroughly. And we were able to see that, regarding fourth grade, they're starting to make a little bit of progress, but eighth grade is kind of still stagnant. And, we spend millions and millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, in education every year. And it seems like the needle is not moving forward like we would like it to, right? So you start asking questions like, well, if we're spending all this money, why aren't we getting results, right? What do we need to do to help our students? I think there are a lot of factors and variables that are beyond us, but I do think that building their grit, developing grit is not something that is totally out of our control. We're focusing on the wrong elements and we're putting the wrong people, I think, in some seats because we're not getting the results that we need. And so I think that, if you continue to work with someone year after year after year, and they promise that they are giving you results to help move the needle forward, but you're still not getting those results, and those people are just getting richer, then you need to start, evaluating and start looking into what resources are you really using that are really working. I want to say this: if you're using a resource out there, you need to, see if you can back it by data, see if it's something that for sure is results driven, because a lot of this stuff that we're investing in, I mean, how many different curriculums, how many different programs, how many different games, how many different professional development series do we really need if we're not going to move the needle forward? And it starts to get a little bit overwhelming, right? And so we have to figure out, how can we develop grit in students? And so, me, I'm just going to keep it real. We're going to talk about what I know, which is grit. Studies have shown it works. So we'll talk about that today. We'll talk about, how do we move the needle forward through grit? Well, the first things first is, if you're trying to move the needle forward, you need to be able to look at different categories. You need to look at the data. What data points are you looking at? What are you working with? What did the data say to you about the state that you're in? What does the data say about, maybe a district or state assessment? What is going on? Okay, you need to know, do you have a starting point? Then you need to see, how have you addressed, whether it's data or an area of focus, what are you doing, right, to chip away at that data and at those results that you received? Do you have a plan, like a solid plan in place, or are you just doing fluffy professional development that's not getting anybody anywhere? I think I am also sick and tired of sometimes when we have professional development and it's just nice, feel good stuff, but it's not answering our questions. It's not bringing solutions. I don't want to feel good. I want solutions. And I think a lot of you out here can resonate with me. You don't want to feel good. You want solutions so that students can, be successful and you can see some things happen. This is a serious task ahead of all of us as educators. It's not time to party. It's time to have results. It's time for solutions. And so I hope that we can at least, begin moving the needle forward through grit and developing grit in students and in each other. I've told you several times that grit is having great resilience in time. If you want to know more about that, please watch my TED Talk titled The Power of Grit, and learn about how to implement the grit framework. You can also visit my website to see the grit framework. I think as leaders, it's imperative that if you're trying to move this needle forward and develop grit, not only looking at the data, you need to have those one-on-one conversations with students and building relationships, especially if your students are your tier 2 or level 1 students. Like, what are you doing to reach those kids? And what are you doing to build relationships? Do you even like those students? Do you even give those kids a chance? Or are those kids in the school to prison pipeline? We have so many of our students that are in school to prison pipeline. It's ridiculous. These are students that are talented, students that are proficient, but they're dealing with different issues, whether it's behavior or they're dealing with, grief. They're dealing with all these hardships. And instead of us dealing with it appropriately, sometimes these kids are put in suspension over some of the dumbest things, to be honest. And it has to stop. We have to stop. And we've got to stop, being in our safe zones and sending a kid out of class and suspending them. We have to start making a better effort to create relationships with students and create relationships with parents and in the communities. Some of us don't even know our community. We don't even know our students. And we're quick to send them out to suspend them. It's like we're getting paid to set them up for failure. We're getting paid to put them in prison. What are we doing? That's not education. That's like institutionalizing a student, and that's abuse. And I think that, this is why I try to stress so much that we need to start emphasizing restorative practices and win-win resolutions for students. And we need to get to know them. If you don't like that student, if you don't like their culture, you don't like, whatever they got going on, do yourself a favor and take the Harvard, bias test and see how can you work on some of your biases so that you can look yourself in the face and know that you're doing what's right by students. Because I think we're wasting time if we're not doing what's right by our students. And it's just we're too far along to continue to beat around the bush. We have to start having solutions. And so many people that are sitting in seats of, position as educators, principals, leaders, whatever, they have some issues with students, and they have issues with, some people in the community and things like that. And I really think that they really need to get a clue quick and figure out how can they resolve these little underlying issues, whether it's like a bias or, the unknown. Right now, we can't afford ignorance, right? We can't afford ignorance when it comes down to who we're teaching, how to teach them. We have to get beyond our fears, stop teaching in a lens of fear where we're scared of everyone. Like, I mean, come on. We've got to get it together and move past that. And this isn't for everyone. This is for the select few that really just, they come to class and they can't even teach well because they've had so much going on in their mind that has paralyzed their ability to be a great teacher because they're thinking about everything else and they're being warped by fear. And unfortunately, fear is leading the way, which is leading to, other just issues that could be avoided if they would just learn how to develop relationships with students and learn how to also partner with the wonderful, competent teachers around them to become a great educator. And so, I think, like I said, we have to look at the data. We have to build relationships with students. We also have to communicate well. We have to understand the communication style. And if students don't understand what you're saying, you're not really communicating. So we have to make an effort, especially if the students aren't speaking our language, English isn't their first language. What are we doing to make sure we're getting the message across to them? It's not enough to say, oh, I sent out an email on the LMS system and they'll be fine. No, you need to make sure that you're making a conscious effort so that when you go to sleep at night, you've reached every kid and you did your best. Do you need to use Google Translate? Do you need to have an interpreter? Like, what do you need to help you, to help students? These are some things that we have to consider because if you're really trying to develop grit, you need all hands on deck and you need all people on the same page. Okay. It's hard to be motivated if I don't understand what you're saying to me. And it's hard to be motivated if I feel like you're targeting me or you're profiling me or you have an issue with me or my family and things. And this is how some of our students feel. And when you talk to students, you pull them over to the side. I used to do this when I was an administrator. And we used to talk to students about their teachers. And sometimes students were like, oh, that teacher just doesn't like me. That teacher's out to get me. Or that teacher just, they don't explain well. They don't go over things. They leave things out. And we as educators, like, we're getting paid for this. Like, we have to do a better job by our students so that we're not failing them. We're not failing their families. Because to be honest, it's getting old. It's getting old that the gap is significantly wide, taking hundreds of years to close. It's getting old that we're not getting solutions, but yet people are getting wealthy and they're not creating solutions that are working. That is a problem. So I digress. We need to definitely visit some serious solution-driven practices because I'm tired of the fluff. Tired of the fluff. I don't want fluff. I want solutions for our students. So with that said, I think that, whether it's looking at data walls or looking at different incentives, having one-on-one meetings with families and having parent nights where you pull up that real raw data and you sit down and you talk up how you guys are going to get through it and create a plan, it's key because they're going to need that. And when you're trying to develop grit, you want to make sure you have all hands on deck. And, some of you might be like, well, is grit really effective? It really is. And so I want to go into some things that I found about grit and, the role of grit in education and how we can use grit. So this was a really cool, it's an article, APA citations. It's been referenced 42 times. So these people must know what they're talking about. So it says here, grit is a non-cognitive factor. See, we are so busy, especially in the math world. We think all of our solutions have to be driven around mathy things. Sometimes you have these non-mathy traits that you still need to be successful, like grit, okay, and like growth mindset, right? We love growth mindset. We've beaten that, we've beaten that down. Like, I mean, we played that out, and rightly so. But, we need to also consider others like grit, right? And so here it says grit is a non-cognitive factor that has received increased attention lately since research indicates that it plays a significant role in successful outcomes in many fields, specifically in education. And grit, it's actually rooted in two facets: in perseverance of effort and consistency, and it's captured by the grit scale. Okay, so they keep going here. They're saying the current systemic review aimed at investigating the association of grit with positive educational outcomes by exploring both antecedents and outcomes of grit. We've identified 29 studies. So 29 studies. So these people are not just off their rocker. They're just making stuff up. They had 29 different studies. So all those naysayers, there's 29 studies in here between the years 2012 and 2017. So if you have an issue with grit or with how it works, you might want to visit these 4 professors here that are competent and were able to bring this knowledge. So thankful for Maria, Agati, Erini, and Christos for their contribution here. You might want to visit them and ask them some questions. So long story short, they identified 29 studies assessing grit in educational contexts, and their findings demonstrated that grit shows weak to moderate correlations with educational variables. Its two facets play different roles, with perseverance being a stronger positive predictor. And that actually goes with my research as well at the University of Florida. Go Gators. And then it says here, positive variables such as hope, positive effects, and family relationships can also foster grit. But you need to also have a deeper understanding of the grit construct. This is why I have a grit framework. Okay, so with that said, they talk about Duckworth, who is the rock star of grit. They say research has been mainly conducted by Duckworth, rightly so. She's at the University of Pennsylvania. She says it's the perseverance and passion for long-term goals. Grit, it's talking about working persistently and vigorously towards a challenging goal, sustaining effort, and keeping an unabated interest over long periods of time despite failure. Now, just think of this sentence. So if this means I have to be gritty despite failures, setbacks, obstacles, there has to be an ongoing force to keep that grit going. And that is that underlying hope, that underlying ability to remain persistent. It says gritty individuals employ stamina to stay on track and attain their goals, contrary to individuals with low grit who get easily bored or disappointed or give up effort or choose alternative actions. It's a personal quality common in leaders and an important factor or important antecedent of success and excellence in every domain, regardless of giftedness or talent. Are y'all reading this? Like, what is going on? Like, who does not understand this yet? Do you understand what these people are saying? They just said grit is considered a personal quality common in leaders. We're trying to raise leaders, right? Common in leaders and an important antecedent of success and excellence in every domain, regardless of giftedness or talent. I've been preaching this for years. And it's like, it's right here in front of us. And it's like, people are still like, yeah, I don't know. Let's look at the research. Let's look at the research. You know, it's not about opinion. It's about the data. It's about the research. And it shows right here, you need grit, no matter your area, no matter the domain, no matter your area of expertise. Duckworth even talked about that in her studies. You look at her TED Talk, she talks about it. And it says it's embedded in two facets. You've got the perseverance of effort and the consistency of interest. So what stimulates interest? What gets you motivated? Not only the growth mindset, but you need a goal. So this is why she's saying you have, short-term gratification, but you need a long-term goal. Now, a long-term goal needs to not only be significantly meaningful, but also engaging enough to sustain an individual's effort and rigor. I'm going to say something too. You know, she has her, grit scale and stuff, which is cool. That's great. Have a long-term goal, but you need to also have some other factor to go with grit. Grit alone in itself does not always give you the answer to prayer per se. I think you need grit coupled with other traits. Like, you need grit with mentorship, grit with, of course, growth mindset, which is part of my framework, grit with, resources, assets, right? You know, that's why we loved, talking about different equitable practices where you actually helped people. I mean, I could be gritty and say, hey, I want to open up a stadium and I want to push grit for all athletes. That's a pretty cool idea. Feel free to steal that, someone. And I want kids to, talk about grit and how they can, build their grit as they're working out, as they're prepping for their game. I want to build that, but I need a couple $1,000,000 to build that stadium. Well, I don't have that. So guess what? I'm not motivated as much because I don't have the funds to do that. And I don't have the building power. I don't have general contractors. I don't have the resources. I just have the dream. That's why we need equitable practices, because then somebody can say, well, you don't have the resources, but I do. And I'm willing to come alongside you and help to build that dream of a grit stadium where we build grit and we train athletes. And then somebody says, well, you don't have general contractors, but I do. I have general contractors that can build that stadium for you. Oh, well, now that you have that, I have coaches that can train those students on building grit. And then I can say, well, I have curriculum, right? Grit workbook for athletes and coaches to build grit. All of us work together as a team and we make it a reality. I have somebody that can, go and either find philanthropists or we can find grants. These are really cool things that you can do. And this is why we need each other. And this is why we need to always consider lending a helping hand for great dreams and ideas such as that one, because it's awesome to come alongside people and to support visions and dreams that are bigger than ourselves. But my grit decreases if I feel like I'm discouraged because I can't make it happen because there's a barrier in the way. We have to be able to remove and eliminate those barriers. And one of those barriers is when students don't have resources. And so for many of you that are teaching students, and maybe they come from, lower socioeconomic statuses, and you're trying to tell them, oh, be gritty about my calculus class, be gritty about my algebra 2 class, but they don't have any money to be gritty to go to college. They don't have any money to be gritty about the next step. Don't be surprised if they don't like a class or if they really don't care, if they tune out, because they need resources. And so I remember myself growing up as a senior. I had straight A's. They told me, India, go to college. I said, what do you mean college? I don't have the money. That's what I told them. What do you mean college? I don't have any resources, right? That's when they said, guess what? We have equitable practices called scholarships. Thank you, Bill Gates, for giving me a scholarship. Thank you to the other 17 scholarships in my community for giving me access to college. Thank you, University of Florida, for accepting those scholarships, because that was what was able to help me, just as an example, to major in math and to be able to contribute to the world today. So many millions of students need resources. I think this is a big elephant in the room, and we think it's only BIPOC students. We have all students that need resources. All students need access to internet. All students need techie stuff, school supplies. All students need help with scholarship help. If you have a senior at your house, I am so hopeful that you have them on some type of trajectory towards success. Right now, you're talking, it's February. We're getting ready to roll into March. I hope you have a game plan for your child. Please do not drop the ball on your child. Anyway, I think that we need to definitely consider those resources, because that is a practice that all of our students need. That's what's going to help to develop that grit. There's one thing to say, oh, you're so smart, you're amazing, but I have nothing for you. Just want to let you know you're smart. What's that going to do? But if you can say you're smart and I can come alongside you and invest, or I can help you with this or lead you to this connection, then, you're talking. You have my ears, my ears are ringing, and I think that, something good can come out of it. So I just want teachers to and leaders to consider that. You're talking about lower quartile and students that, aren't really making the cut, and you're trying to figure out how to raise your school grade, and you're trying to figure out how to get those kids through. Well, consider resources. What resources do you have? What trade programs? What community colleges? What scholarships? What do you have available on your site for kids? Because if you don't have anything available and you're not willing, then stop talking about it. because that's where we are now. We have to stop talking about it if we're not going to do anything, because right now we need all hands on deck. We need action. I'm saying this out of love. We need change. We need change like yesterday. All right, so let's go into more of this researched article. And when they're talking about grit, so it says, let's see. So now they're talking about the method. Okay, let's keep going. Demographic characteristics. Sample size range from 105 to 4,000 participants. Wow. It's big schools to little. Main results. The main results is grit has been found to associate with a range of positive outcomes in education. Oh, look at that. Such as academic performance and retention in education. And you can also look at Bean and Tinto's work on that as well, because they talk about this. They talk about perseverance and persistence. So look here. Grit has been found to be associated with a range of positive outcomes in education, such as academic performance and retention in education. Why are we not talking about this more? Let me repeat it. Grit has been found to be associated with a range of positive outcomes in education, such as academic performance and retention in education. We've got to build grit in our students. Grit and positive educational outcomes. 16 studies. My gosh. 16, y'all. Not 1, not 5, not 12, not even 15. 16 studies investigated grit as a unidimensional factor. Most of the studies found a positive link between grit and academic performances, reflected in measures such as their GPA and other positive educational outcomes, such as retention to education. I don't know what else we need. I think, the writing is here. I'm just going to stop sharing because I think, after a while, it's like, are we going to be in denial or are we going to do something about it? It's time to be gritty. It's time to build grit. It's time to motivate ourselves and to have hope again. For teachers, leaders, I need all of y'all to clear your calendars. Get a grit calendar if you need to. I don't know if you can see my grit calendar here. Get a grit calendar and write out your goals. Like, what are your long-term goals? What is your short-term goal this year? And start chipping away at this. Get gritty again. Do not unplug on students. Do not unplug on the situation, because I'm telling you, we must fight. We must win. We must help students win, and we can help our students win through grit. So with that said, guys, thanks so much for joining me today on the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. I'm grateful to be here with you guys. If you're ever wanting me to come and speak or, to elaborate on any of these things, please let me know. If you want to do a Q&A session or you just want me to talk numbers or talk about solutions, I'd be honored, whether it's a conference or at your school district and things like that. So with that said, again, thanks for letting me be among you on the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. So again, thanks for letting me be among you. A couple of announcements again. This podcast will be featured on the X Factor EDU network, hosted by Dr. Matthew Joseph, and it can also be found on Spotify. You can also find it on social media outlets, which are listed right here. Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is the India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indie238. YouTube is India White 123, and TikTok is Dr. India White. When you get a chance, please also check out the website for books, blogs, or to schedule me for a speaking or coaching event. I'd be honored to join you. And I have a couple of events. Thank you to NCSM leaders for the opportunity to speak at your virtual conference. Also, the STEM conference leaders, thank you so much for that. And also VCTM upcoming conference. I'm honored to speak among you all. And again, this Grit and Equity Talks podcast is, if you're trying to bridge the achievement gap, if you're having classroom management issues, or if your students just aren't motivated to do the work, then you can join me on the Grit and Equity Talks podcast, and we will chip away at some options. So, also, please make sure that you check out the Grit Academy. Send your students my way so we can get them through passing the SAT and the ACT and different things like that. Let's make it happen. Let's finish strong this year. Let's keep grit with great resilience and time. Thanks so much for tuning in again. Until next time, stay gritty. See ya.